You know, you might think that in our hyper-connected world, there are no real secrets left, that every corner of the planet has been mapped, explored, and documented. But what if I told you some of the most mind-blowing discoveries are happening right now, not by huge expeditions, but by people just like us, sitting at home, looking at a screen? Let's get into it.
I'm talking about things like lost cities that have been swallowed up by jungles, or giant craters from ancient meteorite impacts. These aren't just small things either. They're massive features of our planet that have been hiding in plain sight, sometimes for decades, just waiting for a fresh pair of eyes to come along and ask, wait, what is that?
And this is where it gets really cool. The treasure map for the 21st century, well, it isn't some old piece of parchment. It's digital, and it's available to pretty much everyone. We're seeing this whole new age of what you could call digital explorers who are using everyday tools like Google Earth to make finds that are literally rewriting history.
So, our first story is a perfect example. It doesn't start in some fancy high-tech lab. Nope, it starts with a guy who was just trying to plan a camping trip. A Canadian named Joel Lupang was scouting for a good spot to pitch a tent, and, well, he accidentally stumbled upon something that geologists had completely missed for years.
Imagine this. He's just scrolling around on Google Earth, looking at the landscape when suddenly he sees it. This massive, almost perfectly circular shape with a lake right next to it. It just didn't look right, you know? It didn't look like the other mountains around it. So, on a total whim, he takes a screenshot and shoots it over to a geophysicist.
And get this, we're not talking about some little pothole here. The formation he spotted was over 9 miles across. 9 miles! The scale is it's staggering. It really makes you wonder, how on earth could something that enormous go unnoticed for so long?
Well, the geophysicist got back to him and suggested it might be an impact structure. Basically, these are the ancient, beat-up scars left behind when a meteorite slams into the Earth. But they're super hard to spot because, after millions of years of wind and rain, they get so eroded they can look just like a regular old mountain range or even a volcano.
And here's the kicker. Scientists had looked at this exact area before. Their official classification for it was volcanic formation, case closed. But Lupang's simple screenshot made them take a second look. And when they finally tested rock samples from the area, boom, they found zircon, which is a mineral that only forms under the insane pressure of a meteorite impact. So now, a full-on research mission is in the works, all because one guy was looking for a place to camp.
Okay, so let's jump to our next story, which takes this idea even further. This time, our digital explorer wasn't just poking around randomly. He was a 15-year-old kid with a really specific and frankly brilliant theory that connected ancient astronomy with today's technology.
This teenager, William Godori, he was obsessed with the Mayan civilization. And he had this idea that they didn't just build their cities anywhere. They built them to mirror the constellations in the night sky. So he did something incredibly clever. He laid star charts over maps of known Mayan cities. He started noticing patterns, and then he found it. A constellation with 3 bright stars, but on the ground it only matched up with 2 known cities. He figured there has to be a third one out there.
So he fired up Google Earth and started scanning the exact spot in the jungle where that missing star should be. And sure enough, he spots this large, weirdly square-shaped area with features that just didn't look natural. He got in touch with the Canadian Space Agency, and their more detailed satellite images seemed to back him up, suggesting it could be a lost city with maybe 30 buildings and a huge pyramid. He even named it Mouth of Fire.
But the professional archaeology world wasn't so sure. In fact, they were pretty skeptical. A lot of experts came out and said his whole constellation theory was just pseudoscience, calling his work an active creative imagination. They argued the clearing he found was probably just an old abandoned cornfield.
But you know what? Even if he didn't find a lost city, the story is still incredible. A 15-year-old came up with a totally original hypothesis and used tools that are free to everyone to challenge the experts in the field. That kind of fearless curiosity, that's how real discovery happens. That's pretty exciting. All right, for our last story, we're heading out to the massive, empty expanse of the Algerian desert. Here, a YouTuber decided he was going to solve a mystery that had been bugging online communities for years, a bizarre series of perfectly aligned circles etched into the sand.
And I mean, when you look at these things on Google Earth, you can see why everyone was so obsessed. They go on for miles in these dead straight lines, way out in the middle of nowhere. So the theories were flying. Was it just a bug in the satellite image? Maybe leftover marks from modern oil companies doing surveys? Or were they something ancient, like the remains of forgotten desert wells?
The riddle was just too tempting to leave alone.
So this YouTuber decided that staring at a screen wasn't enough. The only way to get a real answer was to actually go there. He put together an expedition and drove 99 miles deep into the Sahara Desert to get some boots-on-the-ground truth.
And this is where the whole story changes, because what looked like simple dots from orbit were actually huge craters on the ground, each one surrounded by 12 smaller holes. And most importantly, he found stuff you could never, ever see from a satellite, like scraps of thin metal wires scattered around.
And just like that, all the pieces clicked into place. The circles weren't ancient at all. They were from an old-school method of searching for oil, way before we had all the digital tools we have today. The holes were drilled to hold dynamite charges, and the wires were used to set them off to create seismic waves. And the final, perfect clue? Old, rusty sardine cans left behind by the work crews decades ago. Mystery solved.
So you take a step back. A camper, a teenager, a YouTuber. What do they all have in common? They're all part of this new breed of explorer. They prove that you don't need a PhD or a multi-million-dollar grant to make a genuine, impactful discovery.
What all these stories really show us is that the most powerful tool for discovery isn't a satellite or some fancy piece of gear. It's just good old-fashioned curiosity. It's that drive to look a little closer, to ask that simple question, what is that? And then to actually follow that question wherever it takes you.
And that really is the biggest takeaway here. These tools are in our hands. The entire planet is laid out before us, just waiting for someone to notice something everyone else has missed. So the only question left is, what are you gonna find?